Hey there everybody, this is Killin' Cat, but you can call me Patrick. Trust me, it's okay. Everyone does. I have a lot of feelings whenever a series ends, or it's the last entry in said series, and the last time I'll be able to talk about it in a format like this, and, well, here that is. Here's a spoiler-free review. Dragon Ball Z Buu's Fury, or Legacy of Goku 3 as it should have been called, is just more of Legacy of Goku 2, but with some added elements and fleshed out combat. There's now an equipment system that, while I don't fully understand, but it's cool, and there's loads of references within that system. It is really simple, but my brain keeps telling me there's more depth to said system than there is, even though it presents everything directly to you. You have your torso, arms, and feet, and then an accessory spot, and it all contributes directly to character growth. Character growth is still the same 5 stats from the previous game, but you now get to distribute stat points to your characters. You'd be a fool to select anything other than strength if you want to beat this fast. You can literally just one-shot everything at a certain point if you do that, and that is what I did for the long play. Yeah, that's a lot of fun, but it could have been more balanced. Honestly, that's what the spirit of the Buu saga was, though. Being able to one-shot everything except for the big bad with the chapter you're on, and also a lot of screaming, which does happen in this game. As a more pleasant thing in this game, you shouldn't struggle with death, except in the post-game, and only if you're unprepared. I guess that is refreshing, but I didn't really ever feel threatened by anything, except for, I think, maybe a handful of times with bosses. This game suffers from, and is often criticized for, the same weird pacing issues that the Buu saga suffers. Is that bad? Well, yes, but it is a really good adaptation because of that. There's some filler incorporated too, but only here and there, and it entirely enhances the game. No joke, that's an awesome thing to do and I appreciate it greatly. 100%ing this game seems really easy, but I can never find the enemies I missed scanning. I legit have no idea where the enemies I missed are. I know I missed scanning a playable character, but there are enemies I'm missing. This would be doable or fixable, but areas and enemies scale with you as you progress through the game, so sometimes you can't go back and find enemies to scan. I genuinely hate systems like this, and I don't think they're conducive to long-term gameplay because then in order to get 100% you have to restart the game and do it again. It's especially bad in this one, where it doesn't make any sense outside of gameplay. Since this game sticks so heavily to lore, it can't be faulted for the lore problems. However, it can be faulted for the gameplay issue here. This is probably the biggest flaw in the game. Yes, it is cool, there's so many enemies and so many different enemy types, but usually they're just copied and pasted over descriptions with a recolor. So what that creates at the end of the day is just a very painful aspect of how this is carried out, and it can't be really excused in any way how you can't get to 100% on your first time through, guaranteed. Is this game worth playing? Summarized? Yes, absolutely. It is a lot of fun, and it's worth it to just finish the series. The game is only around 10 to 12 hours long to get it 100%, though you might have to do a second playthrough, so that could take it up to 20 to 24 hours. Though I think most people would average around 22 if they're doing 2 playthroughs. And now for the spoiler-filled and slightly emotional at the end review, in which I will probably call this Legacy of Goku 3 almost every time, on accident, until it becomes purposeful, because that is really what this game is. I don't know why the game's title was changed, and it doesn't really matter. There might be an interesting story behind it, though, and I would totally be interested in hearing that. Tell me in the comments below, and if it's accurate and verifiable, I will pin said comment. Now, of course, the game actually starts right after the Cell games end, with Goku being dead, as he was for close to the better part of a decade, it feels like. I mean, seriously, Goku used to just be 3 years older than Chi-Chi, but now she's significantly older than him. Everything is in character. It does lack a bit of the humor that the manga and anime had here and there, but hey, it gets right to the point and gets you right into the game. That's an admirable thing in a series with so much dialogue. You also start the game with the Scouter right away, which is a huge bonus, and you can start scanning everyone and everything for your bestiary. I can't tell you how much of an improvement that is to me. I do wonder how Goku has it after death, but hey, look, I won't question it. I really like the bestiary in this game. Much like most things in this series finale, it's just more of Legacy of Goku 2, and that is a good thing despite what a lot of people seem to think about this game. No matter how far you progress in, they get the feeling of the arc just right. They reach the absolute pinnacle of their design here. I just wish they had more time to make these games and not releasing them every year and probably a 10-month development cycle. Imagine what Webfoot could have done on the DS. I digress, more of that later I suppose. You also immediately get a taste of where the filler movies and episodes are injected very fluidly into the plot, and the Janemba movie, Fusion Reborn, is given its introduction before you get into the meat and potatoes of the game, so you know you're in for something cool. Yes, that movie is non-canon, but it doesn't matter. That was awesome, and I did indeed watch it before playing these games just to understand it a bit better, because I knew that movie was in this game. After you hop onto the plane and get to the Grand Kai's planet, they give you a grinding spot, and they give you equipment that makes said grinding significantly easier. This equipment is the way to grind, but as you go on, it has possibly the worst grinding payoff, robbing you of your speed progressively as you get better equipment. Since you can't really alter your speed except for going Super Saiyan, this is a huge detriment, and when you finally get the last pieces of equipment and your speed goes down to 0, you move at a snail's pace. You don't entirely stop and spot, but it's like being over-encumbered in a Bethesda game and how you can only walk at a mile an hour. It's not really worth it. And the worst part about it is the grinding is absolutely required in this game right away. Yes, you can't progress until you're level 65 and you start the game at level, I think, 60? And before you ask, no, there is absolutely no natural way to reach this level before the requirements. So you have to backtrack and continue punching things in the face until you reach the required level. This would be more rewarding if there was more variation in attacks, enemies, and move pools, but almost everything blends together and just ends up being recolors. And Gohan, at the end of the day, gets the worst end of the stick for playable characters. At a certain point in the story, he loses the ability to go Super Saiyan in favor of having his stats permanently increased, except for speed. And for those of you that haven't played this game, you get Super Saiyan right away, and Super Saiyan counteracts the continued decrease of your speed. Sure, this is lore accurate, and this game is primarily lore accurate, but this aspect sucks, and there is definitely a better way to balance this. Just give him the speed boost constantly, otherwise this isn't worth it for him. Just as well, I think the game knows that, because Gohan outlives his usefulness and you'll never need to use him again in the long term except for twice. Every other character remains relevant for your whole gameplay experience. Yes, some are better than others, as is the nature of how Dragon Ball's power scaling works, but every single one of them except for Gohan remains relevant and usable. After the tutorial section, you get a rapid flash through the early establishing sections of the Buu saga, and not too long later, you get into the World Martial Arts Tournament. The game entirely skips over Gohan training Videl to fly, or them spending a bunch of time together in general, and in this version of the story, Videl doesn't go with Gohan and Kibito after the tournament, instead staying behind. Honestly, that is better for her as a character, but it feels a bit lacking on the emotional character development. They simply cut out way too much of Gohan and Videl's bonding, and I can kind of get why. Like I said, these games were made in a very short crunch period. They couldn't fit everything in. But because of that, it makes it an inferior way to experience the character growth and bonding of Gohan and Videl. You unlock pretty much every playable character in under 2 hours if you're good enough at the game. And then, for me, just under 4 hours. The 5 playable characters are Goku, Gohan, Goten, Trunks, and Vegeta. All the primary Saiyans at this point, and nothing more. Sometimes you get to play as another character very briefly, or some characters get fused together. This disappointed me. I wanted to be able to play as Videl, Piccolo, Krillin, Tien, Yamcha, Hercule, so on and so on. The list just doesn't end. I get why they didn't. It would be bloat and distract from the primary plot and the primary characters pushing said plot forward. It's why those characters aren't playable in most Dragon Ball titles. It doesn't mean I don't want to, and they could have been unlocks for the post-game. That would have been really cool, and I would have liked that a lot, but that's just not here. At this point, I noticed that the enemy names still leak into the sprite display screen for them, and sure, that's not a bad thing. It's just a small lack of polish I think could do with some fixing if they had a chance to do this again. Most of the game's problems are small flaws that come from the fact that the development times for these were within a few months to just under a year. Small errors weren't on the to-do list for the developers, and the development time was very quick and stressful. Honestly, what we got, with all things considered, was great, and the minor flaws and tempestuous development period highlight that these guys once more wanted to create an amazing game. It didn't quite reach that peak, but it's good, and it's very lovingly crafted, and I'll get more into that later. Now for the titular villain. Majin Buu appears, and yeah, this is exactly how it goes in the anime. There's a few exceptions here and there, but this is really good. My god, that scene where Vegeta sacrifices himself hits so hard in almost everything it's in. And yeah, it's no different here, but maybe that's just because of my association with this scene in of itself. I'm just a little disappointed they didn't manage to squeeze in Vegeta hugging Trunks. That would have done so much for the impact there. It's still an amazing scene, and it's always going to be an amazing scene. But without him saying that he's never hugged Trunks and taking the chance to hug him, it loses a bit of impact. And finally, after Vegeta blows himself up, the lumps start to show. These are lumps ordinarily in the Buu saga and all smaller arcs within. This game does this a lot better by fleshing out a lot of smaller bits and removing some of the unnecessary fluff. But it's still the Buu saga. Every version of the Buu saga has some pretty major flaws, but I do think Legacy of Goku 3 handles it the best out of all the Dragon Ball games I've played, personally. And I do say this with confidence, knowing that the hunt for the Dragon Balls is around the corner. And with this being my first time playing in close to a decade, it felt new again. It felt like real, genuine fun, too. The whole segment was just so much fun hunting down the Dragon Balls, except for the, Kyodai Pyramid. Yeah, that part can suck Captain Ginyu's toes. But even then, aside from the required grinding at the very start of the hunt for the Dragon Balls, I can't say anything is fundamentally wrong with this section of the game. There's genuinely no objectively bad game design here, which is impressive. There's some subjectively bad game design here and there, but, you know, that's a given. Everyone has opinions. Normally on the hunt for the plot MacGuffins, there's a sizable amount of errors. But every little bit is jam-packed with references back to the series, the origins of it, and even the continuations of it, with such love, stretched as thin as the developers were.
We spent several weeks on this, and we essentially come up with all of the elements of gameplay, what we want to do that makes this different and original, how we're going to treat the elements of the storyline to create the best possible result. The brainstorming process starts with us huddling in the conference room for days and days and days. We do extensive research on the series. We're already fans and familiar with it, but it's important for us to go back through and watch the episodes that are going to be relevant to the game and pick out what parts we want to represent in the game. We obviously can't cover everything because the game would be 200 hours long, but we pick out what we think is the most important and we go with that.
Look, you go kill this boss ninja. It's pretty easy, really, I'm not gonna lie to you. He is supposed to be a quick filler boss. But you think it's over after you defeat him, and stuff him in that wooden coffin he threatened to put you in. But no, it's not. No, go destroy that wooden coffin with him in it. Yes, he is dead forever now, but you get the Goku hat. Or Goku, as they say it in Japan. At the time, this was a pretty niche reference within the series, but the developers knew it, and they knew exactly where to put it to make it a poignant reference. Even the train segment that you play as Trunks for is a very special segment and reference to the original Dragon Ball, and in that same segment, you get Yamcha's bat. You get it out in the desert, but he didn't use it in the desert, he plays baseball with it. He used a sword in the desert. Not related to Yajirobe's sword. After this amazing yet too short segment, you must progress, and Goku goes back to heaven. He only has 24 hours on Earth after all, and going Super Saiyan 3 to fight Majin Buu made him run out of time a lot faster. And it also tired him out entirely and used up all his energy. From here, you might think that the game just jumps right ahead to you fighting Buu as Gotenks, or training as them, but no. This is where you get the Janemba movie. Yeah, it makes perfect sense where they shoved this in. As Goku, you return to find King Yima trapped in his own lobby, and you have to fight the corrupted soul of a former crime kingpin, which is Janemba. Pikkon, a warrior strong as Super Saiyan 2 Goku and that you fight in the tutorial section, has failed in his mission to stop Janemba. But there is good news. Somewhere in Hiffle is Vegeta. He's among the masses of the many bodiless spirits due to his evil actions in life. And you have to traverse the land, solve puzzles, and fight off Nosferatu. Wait, what? No, well, yeah, that does make sense, I suppose. It checks out. They probably would be in hell, but that's weird, alright, man? At the end of a long and probably arduous, if you distribute your stats like a sane person, path, you finally meet Vegeta, who briefly regains his body. Then you need to play as him for a while to level him up. Trust me, you absolutely need it. The grinding in this game is insane and required, yes, but it fits the vibe of the Buu Saga's insane feats and the insane power creep it had. Once more, very in character, it's just the character of it isn't that good. After you get Vegeta, start the grind by heading back to the starting area as him, because you need to go down the other path you didn't go down to unlock a door. His door. A door for Vegeta. Vegeta's door. There's a lot of levels on the way back, and it cuts down the grinding by a lot, or maybe just a little bit, depending on how many enemies you actually fight, because I looped around in areas to fight more. At least the combat in this area feels nice to go through. You need to get Vegeta past level 100, I believe, and then you can finally progress. But then, you get the awesome, the powerful, the Gogeta. And I gotta say, I feel on this. Look, I like Gogeta, but Vegito is where it's at. What's worse is that your reward for getting 100% in this game is unlocking Gogeta and not Vegito. I don't get why. You could have had both. Also, for some reason, they don't remove the halo from Gogeta's sprite. The one that Vegeta had when they fused to initially fight Janemba. So Gogeta is just canonically always dead in the Legacy of Goku series. You can fight me about that. Yeah, that 100% completion bonus, I just don't get it. It is so awesome, yes, but they could have easily done both. Play as Goku, get Gogeta. Play as Vegeta, get Vegito. I know that's not how the fusion inherently works, but that would make it so much more understandable for the average player. And yes, Vegito is the only non-hostile entity that I missed scanning. At least I'm convinced about that, and you only have one chance in the whole game to scan him or play as him. I feel a little robbed here. The worst part is, this was a very easy thing to implement, and now I'm just curious as to why it wasn't done. Certainly setting up a character-specific trigger in the code shouldn't be that hard, right? When you think about it, it takes a really cool completion reward and turns it into only alright. At least it does to me. Gogeta just isn't my taste, and yes, that one is purely subjective, but we really should know why the alternative possible fusion wasn't implemented. Before you do any of this though, you can go anywhere in the afterlife except 2 locations with instant transmission. One you haven't been to yet, and one is the world of the living, which technically isn't part of the afterlife, and I don't know why I wrote it in the script like that, but I'm keeping it in. You should go to heaven and see a completely reformed and happy Dabura. Yeah, no joke, that filler is flawlessly implemented here and adds a ton of character to him in this game. He gives you some stupid powerful armor that I wasn't able to equip until after I beat the game, and then I just didn't. I think that part is a little bit misplaced, but you know what, I'll take it. I could have equipped his armor much sooner, but by the time I got the ability to, it was already outdated. And no, that doesn't mean it's bad, it has its own special abilities. Every armor set does, I think, actually has its own unique ability to it, but I just never needed it for my own playstyle. I guess that's a good thing though, there's so many alternate playstyles you can have for this series and different character stats that you can distribute. Something we don't talk about much in Dragon Ball discussion is that Frieza's the only villain implied in the entire series to have not reformed and moved on. Yell at me about how I'm wrong in the comments below. Since I don't want to forget mentioning it, fusions let you gain experience on both fused characters at once. It makes level grinding so easy, but the fusions last too long, honestly. You can fuse right after the fusion ends, so it just should have been 2 or 3 minutes instead of 5 real-life minutes. Especially since every time a fusion is needed for a story segment, you don't actually have a timer. Once more, very lore accurate, but wholly unnecessary and entirely excessive. There could have been a little bit more leniency here. And now finally, after beating Janemba, you go back to Trunks and Goten, and you get a grinding segment for them. No, you absolutely don't need it, but it is nice if you don't feel confident in yourself. It also lets you go and hunt for treasures and find a place to save your game, which I do recommend, and if you do want to do that former part as well. I think it's a little bit better to wait until post-game to hunt for all the treasures though. After all of this, you fuse into Gotenks and get absolutely beaten by Boo. Yep, you lose. I think that's the best thing about this game and the Boo Saga is the feeling of hopelessness that you have for the characters. You are introduced to the villain within 30 chapters or 20 episodes, and the characters spend the entire rest of the arc trying to defeat them, with them being an ever-looming threat to them at all times. It makes the ending and the payoff of the arc so much better. And from here, well, everything is within canon. You get one moment where you're booted out of the final boss fight to go grind, and that grinded my gears and cut like a knife through the tension of the dense cartoon fog. Yeah, that was just bad. I wondered for a few minutes, just thinking to myself, why would they do this? And I still don't know, because I just went right back to the boss fight. At this point, you're definitely ready for the coming segment. I didn't have to worry about my energy, my health, or anything, at least not until the coming segment, so I haven't talked about the inventory yet, and I'm just realizing that. Okay, so healing items in previous Legacy of Goku games were drops, or in the first one, limited inventory space usables. So that kind of returns for this game. You get healing items and can buy healing items and materials and equipment, all from shops. But you can also get them in drops from random enemies and even go fishing. Until the final boss, I used maybe a handful of healing items throughout the entire game. I only needed to use them during the final boss because Kid Buu takes forever to beat and you need to heal because there's a certain segment where his health just doesn't go down anymore and you have to evade his attacks. But it is worth it because you do get that awesome Vegeta moment at the end of the game where he really starts to branch off from Goku and realizes it's useless to try and be better than him at what he does, so Vegeta has to do it his own way. That is really and truly a very beautiful moment. And it still hits all these years later. He realizes his elitism was moot so late in life, but he still realized it and changed. I think people overlook how motivational that is and how it's just something so true to life. It's such a touching moment and something so many people could learn from and go through in their own lives. And at this point playing the game, something clicks in me personally, and I start to feel very sad. I guess more on that later. We still have to beat the final boss, and I didn't have time to really understand that sadness yet. Kid Buu is by far the toughest enemy in the game, but not the series. Frieza from the first game takes the cake for that. He sucks, way too much health, and the only way to realistically win is to gank the fight. But no, here it's a full-on legit fight for your life against Kid Buu, and until they start adding in a timer to the boss fight where Kid Buu can take no more damage after his health bar empties out, it feels like there's real tension. Eventually this fight does play out almost exactly like in the manga and anime, and considering the ending and beginning of this arc are the absolute best parts, that is handled so beautifully. There is one cut segment that makes it so much better where Goku helps a baby pterodactyl, but I guess that just didn't really need to be added into the game. Yes, it is fluff, but it adds so much to Goku's character. Even Good Buu comes out of Kid Buu, and you actually have him fight Kid Buu for a while. Also, why can't you play as Buu? I digress, I guess. His sprite is too big to get through most places in the game. There is this moment at the very end of the game where it makes you spam a button to win, and this happens nowhere else in the series. And because it does this, you entirely skip an important dialogue from Goku to Buu. That is such garbage design. I hate it so much. It single-handedly took me right out of the ending sequence and made me wonder if I'd done something at any other point like that. God, I just hate that design so much. Developers, if you make a button mashing segment, give some leeway with character dialogue, at least for that moment in specific. It's genuinely one of the most powerful final lines in the entire series as Goku wins against Kid Buu with a Spirit Bomb, and I completely skip it on accident because of a button mashing segment. Don't do that. From here, you can do as many side quests as you want and go to the game's ending. The only thing left to do is get all the collectibles, so I set out to do that. I already had most of them from playing the game, so this was pretty easy. I needed just over 10 Hercule Cafe figures and only 4 Z-Fighter figures. But here, as I complete this, the somberness and sadness sit in. See, I've played this game since it came out, close to 20 years ago now. And then, before that, people saw the ending of Dragon Ball Z about 10 years prior to this game. Soon, the ending of Dragon Ball Z will be 30 years ago. Yeah, the manga ended in 1995 in August, so the third quarter of 2025 will be 30 years. The anime ended the following year in January. And also, around that same time, this game will be a fifth of a century old. That's a full human generation of lives. And here I am, playing this game again. I come back to these titles time and time again, and this will be my last time touching them. 40 years of history have passed by us, watching the series grow from such small and humble beginnings to massive universe-saving fights. And it grows ever further now. Very soon, Dragon Ball itself will be over 40 years old. A happenstance, rousing success, becoming for a while the largest and biggest multimedia franchise in the world. And here's this museum and this cafe, dedicated to that history, lovingly crafted by fans of the series 20 years ago, forever locked in time. Time is ever marching, and these people have moved on, and they're doing their best to live by the series' message. To be better tomorrow than you are today. But then here's me, going back over my comfort zone time and time again. Sure, there's no problem with that, we all need that here and there, but I can't get better by doing this all the time. Except for, well, doing this for YouTube like I am now, recording this, writing this, editing this. It's all part of the craft I've learned to do and love. Nonetheless, though, I'm still stuck here with this game. This game so lovingly crafted by such amazing fans of the series, operating under such strict time constraints because they just so desperately wanted to make a good game that showed their passion for the series.
For the Legacy of Goku games, my job was to draw the characters. I pretty much drew almost every character that you see in the game, although I had a bit of help, so I can't claim all the credit. But from the start, they basically handed me character sketches or screenshots straight from the show or any other sort of reference materials, action figures, anything, and said, here, draw these characters doing these moves, and I took it and went.
Right here, an overview of our world map. And in the actual game that you play, you won't be able to see it like this. It's actually going to be in this perspective view as in kind of a 3D. It kind of looks 3D, and you can fly over it. And so it's like, it's a more realistic view of the world as if you're actually flying over a planet. So this is a really detailed image that we have of this world that, again, I was trying really hard to be as close as I could to the actual layout that they do for the world of Dragon Ball Z. So we had a lot of reference of the world from the DBZ encyclopedia that we took a look at, and I found a lot of other miscellaneous sketches of the world that they had made over in Japan, and I tried to take into account both their version of the world and then the way some of our environments in our areas are, and to try to get a good mix of the two so that our world could seem like it both fits within the actual Dragon Ball Z world and also fits with our game. So we've got all these different areas down here, like this area over here. It's kind of hard to tell because it's small, but this is Goku's house, and if I move over, we've got all these mountains and grass and desert. And there are a lot of areas in here that actually aren't going to be accessible in the game, but I put them in there anyway because they exist within the world. And so not only would that help to make the world seem really detailed and full, but then there could be areas where even if you don't go there, the player might recognize that area and just get excited about the fact that we included it in there.
The show has a lot of dialogue, so it's not something that we can fit in a video game, and also we can't have any voice acting in this game, so we have to have it all going through text, and we can't expect the player to be reading just page after page after page, considering it breaks up the flow of the game. We try to get the dialogue down to its basic core, and we want it to be as short as possible, but at the same time we want it to have all the character of the original dialogue, and we want it to have all the details that are necessary to get the story across. One of the big things that we were trying to do was make it so that someone who has never watched Dragon Ball Z can get a sense of what the story is and who these characters are.
And for 20 years, that has stuck with me. The love and care down to the very fiber of this game's being, down to where the very niches of the fandom at the time were. This game gets such a bad rap, but it's because of the lumpy and rough saga it adapted. If the developers had the rights or ability to adapt the original Dragon Ball or even Dragon Ball GT, I think this would have been much more positively received. It's so unfairly treated with all the love and care put into it. At the end of the day, it's more of the exact same thing we loved about the prior games, and the pinnacle of what this game development type could be. And then, rather ironically, it quietly ended 20 years ago. And then Dragon Ball Z similarly peacefully ended 30 years ago. We get these tiny, tiny glimpses into what these characters' lives are, how they live, who they are, what gives them their drive to keep going, and we see them all grow old and eventually die. They're not frozen in time like this museum is, like this game is, like most fictional characters are. They're a surprisingly growing and ever-changing people working as inspirators, defining an honestly positive way to live and a positive way to be role models for other people. And we get to see that happen, we get to see that grow and develop, and it's wonderful. So many fictional mediums fail at that, and while it could be handled better, with the minimalism needed to slap all of this series onto the GBA, I think personally this was handled beautifully. It needs saying that I relive these arcs in almost every single Dragon Ball game I play, and pretty much all of them do stick with me because they're so material. Yes, it's an entirely fictional medium, but these characters get to undergo genuine personal growth that many people do as well, and also fail to do, not realizing their potential until it's far too late in their life. Not just Goku training to be better tomorrow than he is today being the obvious message of the series, and it can inspire millions, but Vegeta overcoming his most negative attributes to be a better person, slowly abandoning his elitism and feelings of inferiority to be able to realize that you're your own person, and that it's never too late to do that. Yes, you might never reach the full potential of what you could have been, but you can still unlock your true self. It's insanely inspiring, and the pinnacle of the Buu arc, and it doesn't finish right until the end, even if people say otherwise that it ended when Vegeta exploded himself. Piccolo kind of does that too, as the series goes on at least, realizing that he isn't his father and that he could be better, and because of this amazing personal arc that he has, he's still my absolute favorite character in all of Dragon Ball. It's such a genuinely wonderful and inspiring story to see in motion that, until your soul leaves this earth, metaphorically speaking of course, I don't believe in that, there's always a chance to change, until your very last breath. And the reason I get to see these stories so much, that I get to relive these so much, is because the series also can't move on from what it was best remembered for. Who can blame it? Sure, it's great. I wish for the longest time that we'd get to see more of these characters, and we finally have that happening in Dragon Ball Super. That's so amazing to see. But there's so much depth we're missing out on. We're missing out on the original Dragon Ball, and there's so much of Dragon Ball Super not being adapted into any other medium other than a drawn and written one. There's also a lot of depth to these characters that people might just never see, because of a lot of different reasons, of course. Some of them could be that Goku is literally bulletproof since day one in the series, and the biggest threat to the series currently is a tiny blue and purple godlike alien child who could get bored one day and choose to wipe out all of existence. We don't see him much, but I don't know how people aren't more afraid of him. Even the background characters have incredibly deep lore, stories, and arcs sometimes, and those arcs do move forward with their own personal lives as the series progresses. And we don't ever get to directly see that. We don't ever get directly told that. It's just something that happens because of course that happens. This game does have small bits and baubles of that here and there, whether it be from the scanner or the dialogue you get at random NPCs or from random pieces of equipment, and it makes everything feel so much more lived in and touchable and tangible. And this museum in this game is the absolute pinnacle of that. You get to live through the series and see everything that was drastically important within a very limited medium at the time, and it's amazing for it. Play this game. You should play this game despite all of its tiny flaws. It is such a good game, and if you've played it before, play it again one last time, just for yourself. And it's a short game too, just around 10 hours if you've done it before. This series is a service to the fans. A fan service that's not dedicated to something raunchy or dirty, but something lovingly made that 20 years later, I still feel nostalgic over and touched by the very clear care put into the world, frozen in time by the personal passions of the original creators, working under bad conditions, under strict deadlines, and you don't see a hint of the pessimism of that life in this. That's something so hard to do, especially since they knew this would likely be their final hurrah in the series, at least in this medium and styling. And it shows how much they cared for the series and the messages that it portrays. The only thing left, I wonder, is what if the developers had more time? Because if they did, their love for this series could have introduced people to so much more and would be remembered by so many more people, instead of being remembered on some random retro YouTuber's review on a channel dedicated to games now obscured by the marching of time in hopes of reviving them just for a little bit. I mean, the tagline of my channel might as well be, "This game has 5 concurrent players." Very, very clearly, these developers cared so much about the series, and we should respect that. It's not done in bad taste. It's not done with a poor attitude. This game is done with love and care down to its very core, in spite of all those tiny, tiny flaws. And the same applies to the previous game. Not as much the first game, but, well, that's what you get for making building blocks and releasing it as a full title. How do I personally rank this game? You should go for the 100%. All games are experiences, all shows, movies, everything like that. But so rarely is an experience crafted with so much care, even for the absolute worst the series has to offer. I look forward to my last time playing this for my Let's Play next year. Because finally, after all this time, after analyzing the game and the messages of the series down to its last detail, I'll finally be able to move on from it and be better tomorrow than I am today, with the knowledge the series gave me to improve. Thank you all for watching. If you like my stuff, you know what to do. It's as simple as liking, commenting, and subscribing. You can support me on Patreon and Ko-fi as well, and via joining my channel for simply 99 cents a month. I don't want to charge people any more than that unless they want to, so there's also a $3 tier, but to each their own. And thank you guys so much for being patient with me after my Tears of the Kingdom review. That 3-hour monstrosity burned me out on reviews for a little while, but they're coming back, and like the rest of my content, we'll be resuming soon enough, so long as the game I'm playing isn't too long. And for soon to be the last time, I'll see you guys next time on Dragon Ball Z, in the pursuit of more training, getting better, and I'm not going to be pursuing ultimate power. I am a very weak, squishy man. I'll be pursuing whatever makes me better at what I do best. And I hope all of you get to find that as well. Bye.